Hi, everybody. Alan Arnett here with another podcast and a blog on alanarnett.com. It is Thursday, the end of January, January 30th, 2025. And look who is on the screen with me, Joost Kovich. Hey, Joost. Oh, I like it. You're showing us all your fingers, and I won't ask to see your toes, but hey,
Always.
no. Hey, no, don't even joke about that. So you're back from your, I guess technically it's your fourth attempt on Everest, but not even attempt. That's not even the right way to say it, is it? It's more like a exploratory climb.
I mean, yeah, like attempt really probably suggests that I'm like really shooting for the summit, but
Right.
it's really more like projecting. So it's like a sports climbing route, and I'm just going to the crag and like exploring the route, exploring the moves, and like getting some good workouts in the system.
Yeah, getting beta, I guess is the term. So those
Oh
of you,
yeah,
I mean, we've done this is now our third podcast, and again, thanks so much for your time. You're very generous with me with your time. And before we've talked about the previous, the previous projects and previous climbs, but for those of you that don't know Yost, he's early 30s, born in Germany, lives in Chamonix, France now. I think right now though you're with your parents back in Germany for a visit, which is
exactly.
which is
The
great. Yeah,
surroundings.
there you go. Having some good home cooked meals there, I assume, getting putting some weight back on, but we'll talk about that. You don't lose a lot of weight. But you've done some pretty interesting things. Annapurna, you did, which was a pretty interesting climb that you did. I guess you did it at age 25, so pretty young to do Annapurna back in
I think I did it at
2016.
age 23 because I
Was it?
remember Carlos Sylvia was there and together
Yeah.
we were 100 years and I think he was 77.
Between the two of you. That's great, 100. And then also you did what a really impressive climb back in February 2023 on Denali that you did the Messner Couloir. You did that solo. I remember doing a podcast with you after that. You talked about how cold it was. Now your hands and everything, your GPS tracker stopped because it was so cold. And hey, what was there a lesson that you took away from that Denali climb that has served you well on your Everest West Ridge projects?
I mean, one big thing that I took away is, of course, like you're recalibrating what cold really is, you know?
Uh,
Like, I mean, being on Everest, it didn't feel so cold in the winter after that Denali climb.
yeah,
It wasn't so dark after that Denali climb. And so, and the gear was so much lighter after the Denali climb because, like Alaska polar expeditions, polar high altitude winter stuff, you're having this very heavy, sturdy equipment. And so, I guess it was just helping a lot knowing that there is some more difficult stuff out there. Like the Everest Winter Project is so challenging because now we're entering very high altitude and very high wind speeds. But those elements, of course, are more difficult, but all other elements were way more difficult on that Denali climb.
yeah, I bet. So your overall objective on these projects is to I'm assuming, but eventually you want to try to reach the summit of Mount Everest by taking the West Ridge proper. Is that the right framing?
I guess I'm looking more at the Hornbein couloir. I think that the Hornbein, which was first climbed by Americans, I think in the 50s or something, Tom Hornbein. You know more about that,
Oh yeah,
Alan,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
guess.
yeah. Yeah. Tom Hornbein, he, one of the original American on the Jim Whitaker first American team, and he and Willie Unsold, they kind of separated from the rest of the team that were doing the traditional South Col route, and they wanted to go up the West Ridge, and they got up to the end of the West Ridge, which you almost, we're going to talk a lot about this, but you almost got there at this time, maybe you did, and you're able to. They saw the couloir, and they climbed it. They basically the two of them climbed it, which was an amazing feat. And they made the summit, and then they came back down on the traditional side. And so that's, I mean, you're climbing on the shoulders of pioneers. Does that ever impact
Absolutely.
you when you're on that West Ridge? Does it ever? I know you're really focused on the being in the moment, but you ever stop and think about that? These guys, I don't know, I had to do the math, 50 years ago, some odd, 60 years ago, they were there, and you're kind of climbing on their shoulders.
To be honest, like sometimes I see some old equipment in the route, like really old stuff,
Yeah.
like that's just left behind, like completely desolated. But apart from that, it feels like wilderness. It just feels so raw in winter. You only very rarely find those old items, you know? And since the most of it is like this raw nature, I just feel like it's like I'm exploring it myself, and I don't think so much about past things that have been done there since it feels so raw and you don't see those tracks as often anymore. And like this couloir, the Hornbein couloir, is such an obvious and beautiful line. It's just so logical, you know? So it's just kind of I'm just thinking like that's the most beautiful line to do. So that's why it speaks to me right now.
So when you look at all the I mean, there's based 20 more or less routes, named routes on Everest, and then there's an infinite number of unclimbed routes, depending upon what variation you want to take and all of that. But you just said it that the beauty and the aesthetics of the Hornbein Couloir speaks to you. When did you first see that or cite that? Did you see it like on Google Earth, on the reality maps? When was the first time that this idea kind of entered into your consciousness and you said, I'm gonna do this project? It had to be a decade
Hmm.
ago or longer.
Yeah, so I think in 2017, I climbed the highest unclimbed summit of Nepal, Nangpai Gosum 2 at the time. I did it solo, and it just felt great because after a long journey of trying to do some solos in high altitude, like for example Annapurna 1 um, or other peaks, where eventually I realized it wasn't really a solo. After a long journey, I kind of arrived at this high level of purity. I mean, yes, it was only a 7,000, but when I reached the summit, it was just like, um, I don't know, it was just like new terrain. I stepped into the unknown, and I was asking myself, how can I have this great feeling on an 8,000 as well? Because for me, that was a realization. It was like I had found my style, what I wanted to do as an alpinist, like
Huh.
this explorative style and this deep connection to nature and wilderness. And then I was thinking, what could be the biggest, baddest thing? And that was like climbing Everest alone. But then, yeah, if I go there in winter, nobody would be there. So the wilderness would be there and would be this adventure again. Like turning the clock backwards, like being back then. And then, of course, I was thinking, okay, yeah, but in winter, going through the ice fall is kind of pretty shitty. Going from China, it's not going to work either because of permits and regulations. So what could I do? And then I just took a map and looked at the mountain. I'm like, well, couldn't you just go up here? And that could also be a line. And then I was just like reading some old topos, which are hand drawn. And yes, people went there. And I was like, well, I could try that.
I think you said that after you did Annapurna, that you were on the mountain with. You already mentioned this a few minutes ago, that you were there with other people, and that you still that kind of left a not a bad taste in your mouth, but it left you saying, when I do this, I want to be alone. I don't want to have any other people on the mountain, and that kind of feeds into what you just said, and that's why you like that your style is solo, unsupported, no oxygen, carry everything yourself, and you actually kind of modified even that approach this time versus your other times relative to establishing a base camp and where you stay, in that whole methodology. So we'll get into that, but before we do, if anybody is interested in the history here, Everest West Ridge by Tom Hornbeam. This is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. You can write the second chapter or second version of that book once you complete the project. Yes. Hey, so yeah, so let's see. I'm going to go back through the history very briefly. 2019-20, you got to about 7,300 meters in that effort, and you called it good, turned around, and then I guess the next year, 21, 22, you got about 7,300 meters, and I guess weather just really hits you on that one. And then the next year you're going to go, but you got your, I think it was a back injury. Is that right? Your lower back injury or
So
something?
the second time I went to 6,450 only.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Oh,
and it was a very stormy season. The jet stream hit the mountain hard. I destroyed five tents in that process. One was ripped apart while I was inside that tent. It was just like the wind was crazy, you know. That's how I recalibrated what a lot of wind means. Kind of like it was up to 250K of wind, you know, like it
oh
was
man.
just crazy. So there was not much to do there. And then last, like not this winter season, but the winter season before, I wanted to go, but I guess I was very enthusiastic with my training, and I kind of overtrained, and my hip wasn't strong enough to deal with the countless training hours that I put onto it, and so I herniated a disc in my back, which I thought would only happen if you sit too much at a desk or something, you know. I never thought you could do that in training, you know.
Right.
And I was devastated. I couldn't walk for a bit. Then I could walk 2,000 steps a day. And eventually I pushed it to 5,000 steps a day by the beginning of 2024. And I mean, I wasn't sure if there would be an Everest attempt this winter season here right now. You know, I just did my homework. Basically, I worked on it as good as I could, and slowly was fighting my way back into alpinism.
So one of the things that you changed, I mentioned a second ago. Let's explore that. That you kind of your base camp logistics. I think the first time in 2019 20 that you actually had a tent and a kind of a traditional base camp, and you had your photographer with you. I think for a little while, got some fantastic pictures of you. But then you've kind of changed that. So talk us through what that was and what you did and why
Mm,
that change.
the evolution.
Yeah.
So when I did the first Everest winter approach, there were many unknowns. I mean, there were also many alpinists that declared me crazy straight away, and some people that I respect that have lots of experience, that are alpinists that are actually out there right now, said, I give you very low chances. I think I heard the number 0.1% to reach 6,000 meters. So, of course, that was intimidating. You know, these people that I look up to said, like, what the fuck are you doing there? You know? And that was one component. So yes, I had to figure out the route and everything. But then logistic wise, I just applied like the logistics that I would always apply when I go to climb high mountains. I was like setting up a base camp, organizing two cooks. You can't have one cook there because I mean you need two people because if I don't know there is something happening, they need to be able to support each other, you know, and for safety reasons. Um, so I just applied the normal approach, kind of.
Right. Right.
Um, and then I was suffering a lot in that base camp. Like it's extremely cold in winter, so I would sit in my down suit for breakfast, and I would eat like a soup or a hot porridge because, as a good German, you know, usually there would be bread and you'd put something on, but
Yeah.
everything was like solidly frozen, you know, like you couldn't put anything on your bread. And I would not be able to feel my toes or feet when I would sit in the dining tent because it's so brutally cold. Then you have all these storms that break tents and material. It's really hard on the material. And I was just like miserable until the sun would rise. And then the tent would have like, I mean, would go from minus 18 to plus 18 or something in like
Yeah.
20 minutes. And you're sitting
Yeah.
there in a t-shirt. But otherwise, it was tough, you know. And I was also thinking, we're carrying so much material here, and do I really need this base camp? And so I thought, okay, look, when we climbed stuff in the Alps in the old days, yes, people would bring tents and they would climb these mountains. And now we have these comfortable mountain huts. You go to the mountain hut, you go to the summit, you're back in the hut. If there's a storm, I mean, you'll be
Yeah.
comfortable in the hut. And I was thinking, in Nepal, we have a similar evolution. We have all these huts and so on. So why don't I just stay at a hut instead? And then just, I don't know, commute to work in the morning, So then I was looking at the closest village to Everest Base Camp, which is called Gorak Shep.
Right.
But we also often call it Gorak Shit because it is not the cleanest place there. Like the toilets are built higher than the place where they take the water.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, that's kind of risky. Maybe you're getting um, some digestive problems or something.
Right.
So
Right.
then I thought, okay, I could stay in Lobuche. That's one village earlier. And then I
That's
realized that
further
there's
away.
yeah, that's even further away. That's the second village from Everest. But then close to Lobuche, there's a scientific research station, the Italian station called the Pyramid. Looks a bit like the Louvre in Paris. It's a
Right.
glass pyramid. And that's pretty comfortable. It's a good place to be. And so when I hiked there, I didn't know that I could stay there. I was just hiking there. I was asking, hey, can I stay there? And I figured it out. And they were like, yeah, you can like have a room here. So then I had my private room in this, and it was way more comfortable than like the Everest Base Camp. And now, since I'm acclimatized, it takes me like roughly 2 hours of chilled walking from that pyramid to reach the base camp. So I would just start 2 hours early in the morning, but I would start not freezing my ass off. I would be having better rest. There's internet in that pyramid, um, and um, and I think the evolution was just to like reduce, 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 reduce. I
Yeah.
mean, I believe that perfection is not achieved when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing more to take away. And I'm trying to take away more and more things. And right now, I achieved a state where I'm actually having some negotiation problems because, like, the logistics are like, well, you're not carrying enough equipment for us to make sense. Like, you're not having so much equipment. Like, your expedition is too small. Like, so new challenges.
So yeah, Gorak Shep. The first time I was there was in 1997, and it was as you said, it was a cesspool. It's improved a lot over the time, but still, it's not the cleanest place in the world. The pyramid. It's interesting. I was once I went there and I visited it. I borrowed their internet for a little while until they came out and said, shooed me away. But that's I love that structure too. It's really very impressive. I guess the Italian government gave you permission to use that. No problem.
It's run by Nepali now.
Is it? Oh, okay.
The Italian government is not any longer involved, to my
Okay.
knowledge.
Good. Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
the
if
Nepali said, "Can I do it?" Yeah. You know what? I think you're right. I know you're right. That the Italian government, I think they lost their funding because they used to have a webcam there, and they used to take all sorts of meteorological measurements and things. So okay, so now you're doing 2 hours, leave a couple hours early, and but your pack. You talked about that minimalistic approach. So now you still have a tent because obviously you're setting up camps as you go up the West Ridge. You have that one camp below, I guess, the West Ridge proper as you start heading up there. So let's break down the climb. So you get to Everest Base Camp, which a lot of our listeners have been to, so they're very familiar with it. At the foot of the Kumu Icefall, you look up and you see it. But you're going, so you look at the icefall, you're going to the left, right, the left of the
hmm
icefall, and that's up the pass, and that's pretty. I don't know how you would rate that in terms of you know either the Yosemite decimal system or the French system or whatever, but that's not bouldering. That's not scrambling. That is serious, serious kick-ass rock climbing at serious altitude. So walk us through that section until you establish that first camp. So how does that section? How do you climb that section?
So when I climbed it the first time, I went rope solo, which means I built an anchor, I attach a rope, and that rope is attached like to my harness with, in my case, a specific knot that I can open and I can take out some rope. But if you pull on it, it will close. And I can use two carabiners. So the chance of a carabiner breaking is very low. It's not the ideal system, but it's the safest. And then as I climb up, I clip that rope into certain, I don't know, nuts, friends, mobile protection devices, or pitons that I hammer into into the rock. Then I build another belay. I rappel, take all the equipment out, and climb up again. That's in the beginning. Just the first 100 meters of rock climbing took me 3 days on that first expedition.
3 days for 100 meters. Wow.
Yeah, but because I would just climb to the first belay point, then I would rappel again, and then I would come back the next day, climb up the rope, climb the next pitch. It was 3 pitches, and I'm climbing in the down suit, and I'm climbing in big boots, and I'm like figuring it out. It's basically like a first ascent. So you're like obviously going wrong, and then you're coming back down until you find the weakest and best line and figure that out. After that, I'm traversing a bit on some easier rock, and then I'm actually doing some ice climbing. And after that ice climbing, I would rappel on a rocky tower and then come up on that rock tower again. But on the first expedition, I put the line right into that ice, but it was underneath some seracs. And during one of the pushes in the first expedition, the serac collapsed and it took out my route. So when I came back, there was nothing left, and I had to improvise and rappel. And since then, I'm not going there anymore. I'm climbing it very quickly once in the beginning of the climb and coming back down. So the system I have developed now is I'm having everything in my backpack. I'm having a 90-liter backpack, pretty light. And then I drop most of the gear at the bottom of the climb. I just have a light rope in there. I free solo up the first rock step. Then I go to an anchor. I mean, there's still the anchor that I left there. It's still in good shape. I just put some new cord. I rappel on the rope. Then I pick up the equipment. I go up the rope. Now we're from 3 days down to, I don't know, 3 hours, way more efficient.
Yeah.
Then I'm traversing. Then I do the same thing on the second step, but I'm climbing up the ice and then use the rope to rappel over the rocky bits. I put 3 anchors in between just in case the rope gets cut at some other bits, that there is less risk, more redundancy. It's pretty steep and serious. I climb up again, and on top of that second rock balcony at 5,700, I put up a camp.
Cool. And so I'm not going to ask you if you ever got nervous or kind of looked around and said, what in the world am I doing? Because you probably didn't. You got ice water in your veins. Not this time.
This time I'm like the German machine called.
Very focused, yeah.
A friend of mine recently, I had a hard time personally, and I said I was home, I was crying, and I was doing very unwell. And she was like, "You have emotions? I thought you're like a machine. You're like this German alpinist, always serious." And like,
no, you're human too. I like it.
Yeah, guys, look, there is a marshmallow side to me. Even if I don't look like that on the pictures, yeah. On Everest, maybe I'm not a marshmallow, but in real life, I am.
Gotcha. I love it. So let's talk about, so you get to Camp 1, and I'm going to kind of jump it a little, the timeline a little bit, but you're at Camp 1, and you and I have something in common. We were both on Everest in 2015. I was up at going between Camp 1 and Camp 2 in the Western Cone, and you were at base camp when the earthquake hit that killed tens of thousands of people throughout Nepal, and 20 plus or minus there at base camp. So, but you experienced another earthquake that happened, I think it was about 45 miles north of Everest in Tibet near Tengri. So tell us, I think you were in your tent when the earthquake hit. Is that how it goes?
So the route that I just described right now, on top of that rock balcony, is my first camp.
Yeah.
Early morning, it was still dark outside. There was just some moonlight. Everything was shaking and moving. And you have to know it's also situated under a solid granite cliff, because even without earthquakes, there is a chance for avalanches and rock falls there. And so it's just at a very sheltered spot. And so what I thought was a huge serac, tons of ice just crashed down the mountain, and that's why the ground is shaking. But then I realized it was multiple avalanches shooting left and right from the tent, and it was just like, and also lots of rocks coming down, and it was just like steaming around me. Uh, that it was probably, yeah, high chance it's something more than just a Sarah collapsing. And then another Sarah collapsed not far from the tent, and it exploded. And the shockwave of that came to my tent. And in that moment, I was just running the checklist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Check number one: can I be hit by any rocks or ice in this spot? And I was like, no, it's pitched very well. Check number two: can I be like flying off the mountain, like from
Yeah,
that big shockwave? Like, can I be blown off? But then again, it is extremely windy in winter, and it had been also very windy the previous day. So I attached the tent additionally with a climbing rope, like super secure. So it's just like, okay, lean back and enjoy the show, you know? And then the shockwave was like hitting the tent. It ripped out a window, it ripped some holes in it because there were also some ice pieces in it um, that reached me. And then everything, the whole dust settled down a bit. And I was thinking, okay, look, obviously I'm not going to go up because there can be aftershocks. There can be more material coming down.
right.
But also, I'm not going down right away because,
Yeah,
I
let it
mean,
settle.
everything's very unstable. Let's have it settle a bit. So the ice cold blood in my veins as I have, I just went back to sleep and then had breakfast.
So, oh my gosh, that's a great story. So we did jump the timeline a little bit because so you described going up the first approach, got to your camp, and then you made I forgot now, was it two or three different trips up the West Ridge?
You mean the last expedition, the
Yeah,
24 one?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Or
so this, what we talked about right now, this is the end of the expedition.
right, right. The earthquake came
Just
at the
one
end, and
trip.
that's when you went back
Yeah,
down.
this is the end where I was like,
Right.
okay, guys,
Yeah,
look, risk reward
yeah.
balance.
Bye
Also,
bye.
this thing is already unstable without earthquakes.
Yeah,
And I think it was a good call because just a few days ago, there was a 5.1 aftershock and so on. So it was just like, looking back, I'm just like, perfect call. I made the call early. I'm back here. I'm recovering. I'm back to
yeah,
training.
yeah.
But before that call happened, the previous push, which was also the first push that happened just one day after winter solstice, which is the calendar winter begin. That was on 21st of December in 2024. On 22nd of December, I went. That day, I went to Camp 1. The next day, to the next camp, and I was working my way up. And that push was the push where I get pretty high on the mountain.
And that one took you, I think you said it was 6 days versus it wasn't 6 weeks, was it, the first time? It wasn't, it was,
It was way more than 6 weeks. So
yeah,
that push took me 6 days to reach 7,500, a little bit higher than
right,
7,500.
right.
And also, one of those days, I was resting in my tent because I did feel the altitude a bit, you know.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah. Yeah, no oxygen. So what do you attribute that your faster time for this last expedition? Was it the experience? Was it your fitness, familiarity with the route? Were you taking more chances? How did you cut the time down
Mm.
so much?
So yeah, the first expedition, it took 64 days to reach the West Shoulder. And
Yeah,
now I went 200 meters higher, a little bit more than 200 meters higher. So it's not about those 200 meters. The real difference is, as you said, it's the time. Like I went alpine style, single push, everything was in my pack with me, and I was like 10 times faster. And I think that ultimately comes down to way better knowledge with the route. First expedition, it took me a month to figure out the lower section kind of and
yeah,
try different options. Then a part of it collapsed. And also some
yeah,
parts were so risky that my stomach was like, I was getting nauseous because I was perceiving so much risk at some sections when I did it the first time. It was just like, oh,
yeah,
this doesn't feel good. Let's just go fast here. And And now I reach a stage where it's a routine. I know exactly the route. I'm there. It's like doing something very familiar. I'm very efficient. So knowledge about the route definitely cut down the time massively. It's just executing. It's not beta finding for that section. Then, of course, I build skill. Like I worked specifically on certain things. I'm a better alpinist now than I was back then. I develop better gear, so I have better prototypes that I bring to the mountain, different equipment. The equipment is more and more refined. There is less in my backpack. There is the essential there. There's less weight that I carry. I'm more specific about what exactly I'm bringing, and I know exactly what I need, and I know where not to put the camp and where to put the camp. That's something I learned the hard way with these extreme
Yeah,
winds, because in
yeah.
those extreme winds, you really have to find a good spot and a good solution. You're forced to do it, and now I just like apply that all the time, you know?
Give us an
Um,
example of your equipment. Just pick any random one, whether I don't know, if ice axe or crampon or griggy or cinder, whatever. Something that you have tailored or customized that you used this time that you thought was really a not a game changer, but it really gave you an advantage.
all right, so with Black Yak, I created a series of onesies that are like basically like these baby onesies,
Yeah, yeah,
like zipper completely up. And I have a layer. So if you're on my Instagram channel, there is a video where you see all the layers that I'm wearing.
yeah.
And it's just like layer by layer by layer until we have like 5 layers. And all of these layers are highly optimized for my expedition. Some layers in different combinations I wear in different stages. So everything makes absolute sense. And there's not a piece of clothing too much or too little with me. So I can, like, often, even in winter, like obviously it is way more colder on the top than on the bottom. Even if it's winter and it's already fucking cold at the base of the mountain.
Yeah.
So obviously I will layer differently at the bottom, and then I can like layer up, adjusting to the conditions, to the altitude. And um, yeah, you don't want to sweat, especially on winter expedition, because then you cool down, and um, there is less sunlight. There are these winds. The winds bring all these spin drifts and particles. Things don't really dry as good on an Everest winter expedition. So you really need a good management with your insulation.
What is that Black Yak onesie made of? What material?
So there are 4 onesies in that 5 layer system. The first one is a Primaloft Alpha onesie. Alpha is it's like a fleece. It's often hidden in jackets that you buy. Like that material is extremely breathable. It's very breathable, but if you cover it with another layer, it becomes very heat reflective. It's great stuff, but I have used it in that prototype in a sense that it is not covered. I basically look like a chicken or something in that. It's just like, and it peels, it loses all these things. Um, that's why usually if you buy a jacket that has this material, the material is covered behind like a protective layer. But for me, the more performance, the better. So it's purely performance. Then above that, we created a G-Loft suit with Black Yak. G-Loft is like Primaloft,
Mhm.
but it's better. Like it's warmer.
Yeah.
It has more loft. It has a different. It's made in a different way. It's a great material. It's completely hydrophobic. It doesn't absorb moisture. So it's a great layer. Also, in case you would sweat, like down might absorb the moisture and
Right,
collapse.
right.
But this padding, yeah, is something I would wear underneath the down suit. Um,
Is it like a
the downs.
synthetic down?
So the G-Loft is like a synthetic down, yes.
Okay, okay.
And above the synthetic down, I would wear a real down, a very technical suit that has like protections in certain areas. So it's perfect for what I do. Um, and then over that Black Yak down suit, we have developed an oversuit. it's like a windbreaker basically that I will wear over that suit on top of it. And especially since wind is the limiting factor on an Everest winter expedition, I need to be protected against the wind.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah. Sound like you've got that the layer system completely dialed. Is any of that commercially available? Can people buy it?
Commercially available is the down suit. I think it's the best on the market, obviously, because I've developed it with it. So that's what I
Of
have to
course, of
say.
course.
If I wouldn't be convinced it's the best, I would basically try to change it, you know.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So you can get that. And my real base layer is a merino base layer from Black Yak. You can also buy that, but the other ones are custom prototypes. And with those custom prototypes, it's really like racing the Formula One, you know. You'll not drive a Formula One car in normal traffic. It's not built for that. But because you want to win the race, you're forced to innovate. And because I want to climb under these very challenging conditions, we are forced to innovate. And ultimately, what we learn from that development process is going to be built into the Mercedes for everybody on the normal
Right,
road.
right.
And that's like basically there is a technical evolution. And I believe for cutting edge alpinism, you also need to work on gear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar to cars and technology in cars, like the lane changing and all the cameras. It comes out initially in the most expensive cars, and as the technology becomes more affordable and scalable, it goes into the mainstream. That's kind of the evolution that you're describing. So let's jump to the chase. You're on the West Ridge. It's how wide is the West Ridge? Is it a couple of meters? Is it a highway? How wide is it?
It's pretty wide at some sections and pretty narrow at others. So the beginning of it starts wider,
Yeah.
and then there are some sections where it kind of narrows down a bit, and I'm climbing a bit on the side, and you have to check a bit for cornices. Um, and then just before you reach the rock, like where the rocky bit of the West Ridge begins, it's kind of there is an obvious camp space. It like widens out a little bit, and there's a good corner. So that's around 7,550, something like that. That's definitely where I would put a camp next time.
Okay. And so walk us through, I mean, at the end of this last trip, you looked at your altitude watch, and what did it read?
7,537.
7537. And so your goal was for this one was seven.
It was just to go higher than 7.5 because that's the highest altitude that was ever achieved in the winter there. And I just set this as like a mental
Okay.
milestone for me. I guess I also just wanted to send a signal that I'm still there. I'm like, um, I don't know, performing. And I mean, some magazines were writing, let's see how long he can sell this project to the sponsors. And I was thinking, yeah, maybe I should like do something. And I mean, obviously, I was recovering from the injury. I definitely lacked the aerobic base to go to the summit. So I was just like, okay, let's apply some new strategies. Let's test these prototypes, and let's just send a signal that there is progress happening. So mentally, I was like, strongest signal will be if I just go and break the record. So I guess that was the mental approach.
We'll come back to the climbing in just a second, but I want to poke on this a little bit. It sounds like that I don't know if you have that's not maybe not a chip on your shoulder, and you mentioned it a little bit ago that some very famous people said 0.1% chance or whatever that just why is this guy even telling us what he's going to do? Why didn't he go do it? Then tell us what he did. You got some pretty bad love early on in these projects.
Tough
And
love.
so well, tough love, tough love. Um, but now you're up there, and how much of that is a motivation, kind of to kind of tell these doubters that no, you don't know who I am, you don't know what drives me. So for you to make these generalizations about my performance, my motivation, my even my ethics when it comes to dealing with sponsors. No, yeah, you just watch. You just watch. It sounds like that's kind of what was going through your head.
I think honestly, I don't care. I don't care. Like ultimately, I climb for myself. I want to do that stuff. I'm very curious about what's up there, what I can achieve as an athlete, what I can like achieve as a human being. Like really, it's like something that I want to do. The reality of my job as a professional alpinist is ultimately I am not producing anything. I'm not leaving anything behind. I'm drawing some invisible lines up those mountains, and those lines, they are, how do I say, they're creating emotions. If you draw the right lines, they create a feeling, they create a story. And ultimately, that's like my job, I'm climbing for my passion and for everything. But to add to that story, I think it was a logical way to like go now and apply all of that and tell the story a bit further and see also for myself, am I on the right track? Is everything going well? But I don't do anything to prove people wrong. Like, I don't think that's a good long lasting motivation. When I'm up there, when it's really, really tough, when it's painful, like no money, no applause or award or fame or whatever is going to motivate you. Nobody's watching you. I'm there by myself. Like, I couldn't do it if I didn't really wanted to do it for myself.
I'll slightly challenge you there. You do
Okay.
have people. You do have people watching you. You have, I don't know what the number is, thousands, tens of thousands that are watching that little dot on their
Ah,
computer.
yeah, they're watching the dot, but look, it's just like they watch the dot, but it's not like they're physically there or
Right. Sure.
anything,
Of course.
Like
Right.
it's just a dot. And I don't feel it's just like when you're in the military and you're operating a drone and you're having drone strikes, and like it's not like you shoot the people yourself. You don't look them in the eye, you're just pressing a button. And that's basically my connection with that live tracker to the audience. Yes, they are there, but I don't look them in the eye. I don't have to explain them that I don't know, I'm going to turn around now.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so I guess ultimately when I'm there, I'm in a very deep focus, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not doing this for any audience or anything. Ultimately, it's like life and death situations, decisions, like um, yeah, and it's tough. It's really tough. So if people say you're doing this as a PR stunt, maybe they haven't fully understood how much suffering is involved there.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
there could be a better PR stunt, like, I don't know, the longest hair on Everest or something.
So I want to ask you to go into your deep memory. And I want to ask you to go into the moment when you're at 7537 and you're standing there and you look at your watch, your Garmin watch, I believe it is, and
Hmm.
you look at it, you see the numbers there. And
Hmm.
I don't, I want you to describe to us, was it sunny? Was it windy? Were you cold? Were you even aware of the environment? But then you look ahead, and I don't know if you can actually see the true summit from that vantage point or not, but you can certainly look behind, and all you see is this line of single track footsteps, the boot track behind you. And there's only one person that did that, and that was you. And you're standing there, and you then make that decision that, okay, good enough this time. Take us in that moment.
That moment is like, first the watch shows 7,500. Then it shows 7,500. One, two, three, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm at 7.5 now. I'm in theory higher now, but how much higher do I actually need to go, to like just make sure I actually go higher? So I'm like, how about 40 meters? 40 meters should be good. 40 meters roughly, that's definitely higher. I'm not here to like go 100 meters higher because it's already dark. It is very windy. and I can already feel like my toes getting a bit numb here, and like I definitely, yeah, uh, lack a little bit of acclimatization. I'm at 7.5 in the winter, which means the cold air sinks down the mountain and there's less air pressure. So 7.5 in the winter feels much higher. For anybody of
Yeah.
you guys who has climbed Denali or looked into climbing Denali, same phenomena. It's more like considered a 7,000-meter peak, even though it's only a 6,180, because it's so cold and there's less air pressure. So it feels much higher already. And I'm thinking, okay, look, I shouldn't hang out too long here because now it's getting night and you're like the air is filled with snow particles that are blown up from the wind. And the longer I'm spending out here just by myself, the higher the risk. So
Yeah.
let's just move to that 7,540, take a picture there, try to take a few, and then just back, you know? So I reached the point where the watch shows 7,540. And so I take a picture. Obviously, the GPS, okay,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
7,537. I'm like, that's still good enough. I take some pictures around me. The iPhone dies because it's freezing cold. Of course, it dies like after taking 5 pictures. Then I take out the 360 camera. It's too dark to take any pictures with that thing. So I'm like, okay, I guess, well, I did it. Let's go back, you know? And then, you know, I was going back, but I was increasing the speed massively. Now we are going slightly uphill through my trail. It's obvious where to go. And I was thinking, huh, I thought that that West Ridge thing was much longer and much more tricky, and it looked way more technical when I was there 2020, like 2020, looking at it. But I think that puzzle piece is solved now and it feels comfortable and it feels easier than I thought. So I just got a
Yeah.
real confidence boost and I just felt like, wow, like, look, I'm on the right track here. This just felt so good. And I reached the camp very shortly afterwards, like just going super fast down the mountain. And it just, I guess, how did it feel like? It felt a bit like relief, like
Yeah. I bet.
um, yeah, like also I felt warmer again when I increased the speed, got more comfort, um, and also I guess I was relieved that the ridge itself turned out so easily climbable. You know, I wasn't so sure about that. It was a journey into the unknown. I thought, I don't know. I honestly didn't truly stay on the ridge all the time. I sometimes climbed a more logical line, more into the face of one side, and I could draw a very efficient line there. And I was just really happy that that didn't seem to be a challenge.
I love it. And you were there in the dark, so you really didn't get a good look. I mean, other than previously, a good look up the ridge and up the couloir, and so. But you have an idea in your head, in your mind. You have an idea of the next steps beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got a pretty good look because I had the full sunset with me
Hmm.
walking on the ridge and I could see it. And to me, it looked like, yeah, the closer you get, the flatter it seems, you know. It's not as steep and
Yeah,
intimidating as
yeah,
when you're further away. It just seemed more and more possible. And it gave me this kind of feeling of familiarity, like when I'm home in the Alps. I mean, I live next to Mont Blanc in Chamonix. It's just like when you're there in the mountains, the material, it kind of feels similar. It's also granite up there and there's some snow and so on. It's just like
yeah.
the closer you get, the less mystery there is, and the more familiarity. The more real it becomes, you know?
Were you the least bit tempted to? Uh, I mean, the earthquake happened, obviously, and that brought everything to an end. But were you the least bit tempted to maybe go back down to that high camp and then go back up and see if you can't go even higher? Was there any
Mm.
temptation, or were you just, I'm satisfied, I've accomplished what I set out to do, I'm done, I'm going home? Any
Okay,
temptation?
so in that first push where I went like in those 6 days up there, I realized, yes, I'd climbed a few 6,000ers, like I'd climbed two 6,000ers. And on the
Yeah,
second 6,000, I spent a few nights at the summit in my tent. So I was fairly well acclimatized to a certain altitude, but I
yeah,
realized around the 7,000-ish, I hadn't spent time there before. So I wasn't so acclimatized. And I realized in that first alpine style push, yeah, maybe I should have climbed a 7,000 before and spent a few nights on that summit, but
yeah,
I didn't. And so it was a limitation. And then when I was back down, I was thinking, man, like now you had 3 nights at 6,800, and you've been to 7.5. I think you'd be acclimatized enough to go to 8,000, and like you're in like, I mean, obviously I wasn't in the shape I wanted to be because of my back injury, and I missed out on a lot of aerobic base training. I was just thinking, yeah, you could go there. But then I was also thinking, look, I mean, I realized that my acclimatization strategy was not working out well. I mean, it was working out very well for breaking that
yeah.
record, but
Right.
I realized maybe should I like I definitely need to change acclimatization strategy parts here and do it differently. I was just thinking, I mean, that learning takes time, and on my next attempt, it will take, I don't know, 1 to 3 months or something to change the acclimatization strategy to be better prepared. And I'm like, I got that learning already. If I go like 500 meters higher now, it doesn't give me any benefit anyway. I don't have the training basis to go higher than that, and it would just increase my risk being there, not having that aerobic base that creates the safety of strength, of being in good shape. Because if anything happens up there, I need to deal with it
Yeah.
myself.
Right.
And yes, we can think maybe a rescue team will climb up there. No, no. I think nobody's going to climb up there to help me. And helicopters um, cannot fly, especially since when I was there were helicopter issues. From the 1st of January, helicopters were banned in the Khumbu area. And there were like big issues because no helicopters would fly there and protests and so on. And so even with a minor thing where a helicopter could have helped me out, there wasn't an option. I mean, I've never been rescued in my career, and I would like to keep that record, but it's a consideration.
Yeah.
And those things just kept piling up. Then there were these earthquakes with potential aftershocks. And it was just like, and I had already achieved my goal. I was just like, look, in order for this to really work out, everything needs to stack up in my favor. And right now it's just stacking up like in the opposite way. So it was an easy decision. I was just like, look, I'm very grateful that things worked out so smoothly and that I'm heading in the right direction with everything that I'm doing. Let's just go home.
There's a saying in Broadway or the West End with plays or in theater that always leave them wanting more. So I'm going to refrain from the obvious question that everybody wants me to ask you, and that is, when will you return? What's next? Are you going to go for the summit the next time? I'm not going to ask you those questions. Instead,
Thank you.
I'm just going to say, Yost, congratulations, serious applause. Congratulations on doing your thing your way and setting a record. It's really a pretty impressive achievement by any standards. And so, I don't know if I can say this or not, but hey, I'm proud of you, guy. I'm proud of you. Way to go.
Thank you, Alan. That means a lot to me.
All right,
And
man.
spoiler alert, I'm going again.
Thanks, Yost. Namaste.
All right. Yeah, Alan, it was good talking to you.